Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Seed Speaks. My name is Alex Martin, and I'm serving as the editor of Seed World. And today I'm absolutely happy to be your host. Today we're joined, as you can see, by a slew of panelists to talk about something that is always kind of top of mind for companies: employee retention. You know, hiring a good employee is one thing, but keeping them is another monster entirely. So today we're here to learn some tips and tricks and hear what experts in the industry are doing to mitigate that. So first, I'd like to start by introducing 4 of our speakers and letting them have a little bit of a spotlight to kind of tell you something about them. So I'm going to start with John Wyffels of Wyffels Hybrid. John, thanks for joining us. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Alex, glad to be here. As you mentioned, my name is John Wyffels, and I'm the president of Wyffels Hybrids. We are a family-owned business located in Northwest Illinois, and we are a very focused seed business. We focus on corn only, and we focus on about 5 states in the Central Corn Belt. Very excited to continue to serve corn growers in this business, a very noble purpose in life. And my grandfather actually started the business in 1946. So here in 2021, we are celebrating our 75th anniversary.
Perfect. Thanks so much, John. We'll be excited to hear a little bit more from you about what it's like to see the independent side of employee retention. But next up is Mark Waschek from Ag One Source. So Mark, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. I'm with Ag One Source. We are an executive recruiting firm and talent management consulting firm focused specifically on agriculture. And myself, I do executive recruiting in the upper Midwest for leadership roles and spend a lot of my time working specifically in the seed sector on all levels of hiring, retention, incentive plans, all of those types of things.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mark. Next, we have Deepashri Khare from Syngenta joining us. So Deepashri, would you mind giving us a little bit of insight into you?
Thank you, and 10 on 10 for pronouncing that correctly. I'm Deepashri Khare. I work with Syngenta in North America, and my current role, I head HR for our North America seeds business. But as you know, Syngenta is part of a larger group of companies. We are now officially the Syngenta Group, and we have, in addition to the seeds business unit, we have crop protection. We are the leaders in crop protection. As well as now with the Syngenta Group, we have Adama and we have our China business unit. So it's really interesting to see the 4 parts of the business come together. And we've been exploring a lot of synergies and innovations as the Syngenta Group. And I have had the good fortune of working for over a decade in HR in ag specifically. And I think it's exciting to see how the space has evolved, especially from an HR standpoint. And very proud to be part of Syngenta, who's really experimenting on the forefront with a lot of innovative practices, especially around future of work and some other practices as well. So happy to be on this call with my colleagues.
Yeah, definitely. And I would assume that certainly HR and especially employee retention has definitely changed over the last 10 years, especially as we dive into a new generation. But I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later. And finally, all the way from Canada, I'd like to welcome Sarah Foster from 2020 Seed Lab. Sarah, mind giving us a brief insight into you?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much, Alex, for inviting me. So I emigrated from the UK back in 1984. So I've got about 40 years of experience as a seed analyst in the agricultural realm. And I started my own company, 2020 Seed Labs, back in 1989. So we're celebrating 32 years this August. And just a little bit, I'm not really involved so much on the bench, although I do get involved with our Chilean production for our multinational clients. So I am testing when I'm down there for the 2 months at the beginning of the year, which is the contra season, and then a little bit of crop inspection. So I keep my fingers in the work, but primarily I'm representing the company as the president.
Well, fantastic. And congratulations on that anniversary. That is a long time in the industry.
It is.
It is for sure. Well, thank you so much for everyone for those quick introductions. And with that, we're going to kind of jump into it. So viewers, if you listened to us last week, you should have heard a lot about how to recruit those new employees. But after we know that, the battle becomes that you have to keep them. It's something companies are facing every single day. So I wanted to start our topic by asking Mark, who, as he mentioned, is a consultant who works with different businesses and seed companies to kind of work around recruitment and retention. What are some of the challenges you see when it comes to employee retention from the companies that you work with?
I would say the biggest challenge organizations have most recently is a situation where they're confusing the pandemic with some other things, right? And I think what we need to recognize is the pandemic has actually given us the opportunity to improve employee retention as opposed to use it as an excuse for not having good employee retention. And where I'm going with that is the pandemic for all of us throughout the world, it caused all of us to hit the pause button and really think about what is important to us personally. Whether we liked it or not, if you were working in an office and you had to go remote, you had more time with your family than you've probably ever had in your career. And it worked really well for 90% of the folks out there. And there are 10% that really wanted that need to get back to the office and go back to work. And I think that organizations need to realize that now that their current employees and future employees have that perspective, it's no longer, not that it ever was before, but it's definitely not about the money. It has nothing to do with the money anymore. It is all about quality of life, and quality of life is not about the money. It's about, am I going to have the right cultural experience at work? And is it going to enable me to have the right family experience at home? And I think that's the perspective that organizations need to take. It's not about bonus programs, ping pong tables, free lunch, any of that stuff. It's really about culture and quality of life at home. And how can you dovetail that into the work of the employee? Because once you figure that out, you have an employee for life.
No, I think that's great. And that actually brings me up to a point that I was kind of wondering, which is how do you keep people engaged, especially right now during COVID? And how do you keep those employees excited about work? So I actually wanted to direct our next question to John. So John, as an independent company, I'm sure that comes with all of the challenges that employee retention usually does, but you also are working to create such a more unique work culture. How do you get people excited to come to work every day?
Yeah, I think, there's a few different things that I would mention, Alex. I think first and foremost, one of the things that sets our business apart from many others in the industry is really just our size. As a family business with 175 full-time employees and a few more hundred seasonally, it really provides us an opportunity to build relationships with folks. And I think, I'll just build on something that Mark shared there that, it's not about the money. I think one other thing that's really important to people in addition to flexibility is there someone in the organization that knows me and cares about me? Do they genuinely care about me? And so, that's something that's really important to me as a leader of the business, is an opportunity to sit in on, interviews of anyone that's going to enter the business. To really understand, is it a good mutual fit for our culture and for how that individual, kind of views life? So I guess I would just say that, I think that genuine care is a really big piece to, building a relationship with an employee and setting ourselves apart.
And I think that is actually an excellent point. Every employee wants to know that they are cared about and that they are valued at work, which actually gives me a great segue to bring Sarah into the conversation. Sarah, I know you had such an interesting situation happen during the pandemic. That you were able to kind of get employees a little bit more engaged at work by turning one of your office spaces into a kind of work from home school. Why did you see a need for this, Sarah, and how have employees responded to it?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think they really realize that we care about them. And that's very, very important. And just to, follow up on what Mark said, it's not about the money. It is very much about work-life balance and providing a safe place to be, especially through this pandemic. So it wasn't easy. It was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done. I'm a huge risk taker, but this had to have been probably in terms of, our insurance, were the children going to be safe in our environment? And, overall, how was it going to affect all the other staff who don't have children? So our organization is made up of about 2/3 female, of which a good portion of them have children at school. So I wanted to provide a safe place for the children. And that way the parents could come to work, because we are essential. We were considered essential in agriculture when this pandemic started. And, we run a seasonal business, but we don't have the highs and lows of being able to hire people when we need them. So it was just important to us to offer our staff this kind of a resource. And it was met with an overwhelming response. We interviewed a number of people and ended up choosing a child psychologist, and who, was just fantastic. So out of this, now we're closing the door because we're all hopefully going back to some sort of normality. The children are leaving at the end of this month, and one of them wants to be a farmer. His eldest sister, who was working with us, got a part-time job with us. And, it's just encouraging youth to see what it's like in the real world, and what better than to be able to go to work with your parents, And one of the little kids, she was grade 1, couldn't read or write, and she's leaving, partially reading and partially writing. So I feel, very, very happy about, what we did there. And I think ultimately it was providing that safe place and eliminating some of the scariness around COVID,
Absolutely. It sounds like not only are you doing some employee retention, it also sounds like you're doing some employee recruitment there, since one of the little boys wanted to be a farmer now. That's awesome to hear.
That wasn't the intention, but I just think it's fantastic that, that this was available.
That definitely sounds like it was. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and come to Deepashri, who is coming to us with a completely different angle than anyone else coming to us from Syngenta. So Deepashri, as a kind of global organization, I know one of the big concerns, especially when it comes to employee retention, is making sure all of your employees are kind of aligned with the company vision. So how do you ensure that employees are aligned and happy with the company's greater global vision?
Sure. It's interesting to hear the perspective of different people on this one in terms of just engagement and retention. And I think one of the things we try to do at Syngenta is enable that warm, fuzzy feeling of a smaller organization while enabling the infrastructure of a larger organization, right? I mean, I keep talking about it as we are a startup at scale, and I think having that mindset really helps us get anchored on how do we get employees aligned to the vision, because I think that's the one thing that a startup has in common, right? Everybody is kind of aligned to the same vision. And we do some of the stuff that the other companies do as well. We do have town halls and we have communications and, the regular emails. But I think what's really worked for us is to think about how can we as a region envision smaller sessions, whether it's leader chats or at sites where we talk about our vision, not just as the Syngenta group, but what we are trying to do in North America Seeds, and really encourage people to weave themselves into the story, right? So we talk about being the most trusted and collaborative advisor in the marketplace for seeds. And so if I'm in HR, what does that mean for me? If somebody's in production and supply, what does that mean for them? Enabling a trusted supply chain partner, or me enabling my sales force to focus on what's important, which is going to the farm and talking to the farmers. And I think thinking about how do I integrate that vision into the day-to-day jobs that they have, right? Where it becomes accessible to me. It's not just this fancy corporate speak in a town hall, but how does it come to life on a day-to-day basis? And one of the biggest hits that we had was we actually had I want to say a poster session of our strategy in different sites. And this happened when I joined. And we had a bunch of leaders stand at each poster and try and talk about what it meant. And employees rotated and started asking questions. And it was a two-way discussion. And we said, okay, how do you think your role helps? Or can we do something different to enable you to do this better? And it was just a wonderful exercise, because employees, one, saw the vision, but two, also saw how they were participating in the strategy, right? So I almost want to say it's vision and how are they enabling the strategy to get there. I think that approach has worked well for us.
That is absolutely fantastic. Sounds like a good approach, especially when you have to work in different offices like that, to be able to show how everyone is kind of fitting into the pieces of the puzzle. Kind of shifting gears a little bit back to what you mentioned earlier, Deepashri, I wanted to kind of think about how employee retention has changed over the past couple of years. And Mark, I'm shooting this question over to you. I know that there's often been the argument of the newer generations, thinking the millennials, the Gen Zs, are kind of less likely to stay at a specific company for a longer period of time. Think about those people who stay for 10, 20 years at a time. Mark, have you seen that? And do you have any kind of insight into why that is happening?
I love this question. Because I basically flip the theories on upside down on top of their heads when I talk about this, and they are based on facts. I'm not just making this up. But what's interesting about this is let's be honest, we're talking about, typically it's a baby boomer versus millennial issue, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not giving out my age, but let's just say us Gen Xers are a little tired of getting caught in the middle of this argument, especially when the baby boomers are the ones who raised the millennials in the first place and are now coming to us to solve their problem, right? I mean, let's be honest, that's exactly what's happening. But what's really funny is when you break down some of the things that have occurred over time, and again, I'm speaking about the US, but I think a lot of these, I know we have people from all over the world watching this, but I think a lot of the challenges are similar globally. We can go back to a couple of things. One of the things is in the US in the late 70s, somewhere between the late 70s and the early 80s, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics was created and started tracking job changes. Now, keep in mind, at that point in time, today's baby boomers were about the same age as today's millennials. And what do you know? The turnover rate was actually 0.25% higher annually with the baby boomers at age 25 than it is with the millennials at age 25. And that's a fact, right? That is an interesting point that a lot of people are forgetting about what it's like to start a new career and realize what I just thought I wanted to do isn't really what I want to do. Or, and you don't know what you don't know when you're taking a new job. You don't have the perspective of what you like and don't like from a career, from a supervisor, from a company culture until you figure it out. And I think a lot of people forget what it was like early in their career. The other thing that affects this argument is that we also have to look at how people were raised. And I'm not going to go too deep into this, but when baby boomers were raised, at least in the US, most of them were in single income families. They had a parent at home all the time. So they went to school, they came home, there was a parent there to guide them every step of the way. They had conversations about what they needed to do. And when they got their work done, they could go play, but it was all about a conversation and earning the right to go out and play or do whatever it was you wanted to do, right? Millennials, they are the exact opposite. 90% of millennials in the US grew up in a dual income home because of the economy in the 80s, right? Everybody had a dual income family. Most of those kids were coming home to an empty house, but on the refrigerator was a note, a checklist, if you will, saying do this, 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 and this. And when you get this checklist done, you can do whatever you want. Now, the number one complaint you get from baby boomers who are currently managers are, I don't get this. I give them a list of things to do, and as soon as they're done, they think they can go home for the day, right? Well, think about that, right? That is how they were raised. The other thing to think about is that is causing some of the challenges and friction is that I will definitely say there are no facts to support that the younger generations are not willing to work as long and hard. And I could say there's enough cases to show they're actually willing to work longer and harder. It's just differently, right? Baby boomers were raised and managed and trained in an environment where the only way you could see if somebody was working is if you could physically see them with your eyes, right? You need to be around people. You need to know that they're working and they need to check in with you. The millennials and especially Generation Z, because the Gen Xers are raising the Gen Z, the way kids are learning in grade school, high school, and even college is incredibly different than Gen X and the boomers have been trained, right? In our environment, there may have been an occasional group project, but at the end of the day, your grade was your grade. You earned your grade alone. You studied, you took your test, and that was the grade you got. That is very rare in today's learning structure, right? It is all based on very collaborative learning, right? A lot of grades are based on a collaborative group environment, collaborative discussion, collaborative projects, collaborative results, right? And that is how they want to work. And by and large, you are actually getting a 1 + 1 = 3 type of scenario in that work environment. But the challenge is a lot of organizations aren't structured to handle a true collaborative work environment. They want to give an assignment to a person and have them get that done. And that goes against how these next generations have learned, which that friction only goes on so long. And if the two of them can't figure out how to work together, that creates the turnover. It's job dissatisfaction because they aren't able to do as much as they want to do. It's not that they don't want to do it at all. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I think that's a good point to look at. This is how they were raised, and that is just kind of a portion that stems from it. So I kind of want to jump into John again and see what he's seeing in terms of employee loyalty at an independent company. So for example, John, have you kind of seen this trend of younger generations being flightier, or have you been able to, maintain and retain some of those employees a little bit more so than the trend would state?
Yeah, good question, Alex. I guess I would say that, we have to do things a little bit differently at times, given we're one of the smaller businesses that maybe doesn't have the reputation of one of the big four. We also don't maybe necessarily have the location, the geographic, here's where you come to work in a big city, right? A lot of our folks, a lot of our employees are going to work in smaller rural communities. And so, we just have to think about our hiring practices a little bit differently. Many times we find that we're hiring folks that are from those communities. So, if we want to hire somebody or find the right salesperson for O'Brien County in Northwest Iowa, we're probably going to talk to some folks that are from that part of the world and are passionate about continuing to live there and serve neighbors that maybe they've known for a long time. So that's a part of it. We also have some rituals, I guess I would share though as well, in terms of celebrating and really recognizing some of those significant anniversaries, 10, 20, 30 years with our business that, I think are motivating to people. I think they inspire them to have a great career. But I think the final thing I would just share is that I personally believe it's really tough to paint broad brush strokes over generations. I don't think that just because I'm a millennial that maybe I necessarily fit that box of what, the generalizations of millennials are. So then again, it comes back to having a conversation during the hiring process to really understand what motivates someone, what makes them tick, and are they aligned with the culture that you're building? We're an independent business. One of the things that we believe fundamentally is that people like to have autonomy. They like to have decision-making authority. And so we have built a culture and decision-making structure to allow folks to make decisions, And I think that motivates them. I think that encourages them to stick around. And when we talk to folks that are looking to join a new opportunity, this is one of the things they're most excited about when it comes time to joining Wyffels, is the opportunity to really own their role and have some decision-making authority.
That sounds great, John. And it sounds like a really big portion of that is just listening to people, for sure. So Sarah, we have about 5 minutes left. I just want to give y'all a heads up, but because I'd like to squeeze in about 2 more questions to y'all. But Sarah, I'd like to kind of turn to you. And I mean, clearly we've heard your story about you turned your office space into a school, obviously by listening to your employees. So I wanted to ask what your recommendations are to listening to employee feedback and how you try to implement that feedback in a day-to-day organization.
Well, we're a laboratory that's made up of 3 or 4 different divisions. And so our work is very structured, and, we don't know what we're getting on a daily basis, sort of thing. So there's a recipe for the job, and, you come to work and you get those tests done and the results go out as quick as possible. So there's not always a lot of opportunity to sit down and talk to the staff. Mm-hmm. Or you would not think. But during the pandemic, that really changed, because we changed a lot of the ways that we did things, because it just allowed us to really think differently about how we were organized and, what we were doing as an independent company. And so our motto is, under 2020 Seed Labs, is never stop growing. And I mean, essentially, we cannot never stop growing, because in agriculture, things change. So one of the things that we just recently implemented is we now have sessions with each department on a regular basis, where we give people a list of questions and we ask them, 3 or 4 days later to come back, and we sit down, and it's a very informal process. And there's no 2 ways of looking at this. Your staff know lots, and that information that comes back from them, once we've documented it, be proactive and go out and make sure that you implement those things, because there's nothing worse than somebody coming to you with an idea that you're not actually going to implement, or even, and if it's not a good one, that's okay. It's people have spoken up. I watch my people very, very closely. We celebrate, we enjoy the good times. We've celebrated all the anniversaries. We celebrate their anniversaries. And we've got some long-standing employees. The business has, as I say, been operating for 32 years. And next to myself, we have someone who's been there for 22. And I don't think, other than the most recent, 1 or 2 years, we're always adding new people. But we've created a culture where our door is always open. Come and talk to us. If you're not in on the group sessions, absolutely come and talk to us. And in agriculture, things are changing all the time. So we need to know, what's going on. They need to know from us, and we need to know from them.
Well, and now we're bumping right up against time, but I'm going to squeeze in this last question for Deepashri. Deepashri, I'd like you to look into your crystal ball for a minute. I know you've mentioned that you've been in HR for a long time and you've seen it change drastically over the last couple of years. What are you thinking that it's going to look like in terms of employee retention in the future?
So I think my colleagues have summed it up well, where I think retention is going to be a combination of what experiences can you offer people, both in terms of personal and professional development, right? And how are you taking empowerment and autonomy to the next level? And I'll just share one example. We have something at Syngenta called as the Value Awards, where what we've done is we've taken recognition to the employee level. So anyone can nominate anyone for a value award, and there's actual points associated with it, and you get a reward. which is revolutionary compared to how we used to do, like, distribution ceremonies, and we have some of that too. But this is really to accommodate a retention culture that allows everyone to be part of the retention process, right? It's not top down. It's not, I'm your boss, and so I'm going to reward you and make you feel good about being here. It's about how are we creating that culture of trust and inclusion and empowerment where we are all together. And I think that's not changing. In fact, I think it's very integral to the way agriculture is. It is a community. We say it takes a village, right? And it's really taking that to the corporate workplace. Whether you're in a big four or you're an independent ag company, I think this spirit of retention is going to be the same. I think the same thread is what all of us are striving to do. And I'm actually very, very pleased with that, because I think that is a very inclusive way of retaining employees, irrespective of whether you're a millennial or a baby boomer. Everyone's included and everyone's invited.
I think that's a great point to end on, Deepashri, that we're all working towards the same goal of employee retention and making sure it is inclusive, and that we are doing the best we can to make sure all of our employees are happy. But that is unfortunately all the time we have for today. So I wanted to thank all four of you for joining us today. And viewers, if you've missed part of today's live stream, please don't worry. We're going to have this available on demand on Facebook and YouTube, as well as on all of our sites, from Seed World to Germination to European Seed to the Alberta Seed Guide. So if you have any questions about this subject or any ideas for future challenges we should tackle, send a message to Seed World's Facebook page, or even better, feel free to shoot me an email. And be sure to tune in to Seed Speaks next week, where we're going to have our host, Mark Zinkowitz of Germination Magazine, talk to us about remote work and all the challenges and benefits that have accompanied it. And we hope to see you there. See you soon, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Okay, bye-bye.